Good morning, bright and early morning here in Pretoria. Nice and cool day for starters. Rian Kutsia from Fortis Proactive Defence Solutions. And this morning I am talking to Walter Meyer again from Wild Medics down in the beautiful Western Cape province. Walt, good morning and welcome.
Morning, Rayan. Thank you for having me again.
Walter, today we're going to be talking first about a medical kit for your vehicle. I want to ask you, for starters, what essential items would you say I would be requiring for my medical kit that I want to basically travel around with in my car?
Yeah, Rayan, I think it's once again it always comes back to also what do I know before I make those decisions. I think for motor vehicles specifically, you want to expand on your bleeding control equipment that you have. So last time we discussed the individual first aid kit and sort of bleeding control equipment. So
Yes.
one might want to expand on that to cater for more people potentially. And then you also want to look at maybe adding some more general first aid kit items to that list. So things for burn wounds, for instance, would be useful in a vehicle. Potentially items to use to wash out your eyes, etc., etc. Even more sort of wound care items. So something like a pair of tweezers and things like that. So if you're in an incident and you're covered in glass, after everything that's serious is under control, you can always clean those wounds up if you need to.
Yes.
I guess it would also depend on how far you travel. If you're traveling around a developed urban center, you probably need a bit less equipment. And the further away you travel, the more things you need. If I think like myself, I travel approximately anything between 60 and 70,000 kilometers a year by route to deliver training all over the show, often in remote areas. And actually often find myself getting involved in places where, I wasn't dispatched to be there. I just happened to come across it. And the amount of equipment you need can sometimes be staggering. It is also useful, some items where if you look at something like a tourniquet, for instance, generally we recommend that people carry the windlass style tourniquet, the one that you wind up with a little stick, right?
Yes.
In a vehicle kit, for instance, I add things like the SWAT tourniquets in there, which is an elasticated wide sort of a piece of rubber, basically, that's indicated how tight you have to pull it. So the benefit there is you can add, say, 3 of them to the kit for a price of one windlass tourniquet, or especially something like a CAT. The benefit there is that, or the reasoning there is that you'll possibly be using it on other people. So if you already have an IFAC with you, maybe carry equipment that you're more willing to sacrifice as well. If you start dishing out cats to unknown people or softies to unknown people, it gets expensive very quickly. So I consider those things as well when I pack a vehicle first aid kit. And then I think an important thing there is it's the size of a kit. Once again, you often, especially new first aiders, you get people who come and they do an advanced course, and then they want to pack sort of a paramedic size bag, which like what a paramedic might carry on duty.
Yes.
It's the size of an overnight hiking backpack, basically. It's a really big thing. Now, it's fantastic if you have all that stuff with you. The problem is if it becomes an annoyance and you start leaving it at home because you need space in your vehicle, or you don't, I need to upload another person, which I don't normally do, or something, and now I leave it at home. And that's the day you're going to need it, right? So I generally have a separate, smaller first aid kit that always lives in the vehicle. And then I still, obviously being a medic, I generally have a medic bag. So,
Yes.
but that is not always in the vehicle. Sometimes I have to move it and so on. But yeah, then I put a smaller first aid kit in. And yeah, as I said, considerations of where it is that you're traveling and what are the potential risks, and how far are you away from help?
So if you're talking, I mean, I spoke about the size of a medic bag, and I mean, I've seen those bags. It's a big bag. If
Yeah.
you've got a very small little car, and you want to go anywhere on holiday, you are probably going to have to make choices.
Yes.
So, how do you go about choosing a size? What sort of size are you looking at? Something that can store, well, most, if not all of the essentials that you may need. What would you say is an ideal sort of size, if there is anything like that?
Yeah, that becomes a difficult question because the more you know, the more stuff you want to pack in as well. But look,
Yes.
if I think of the kits that we sell, we've got at the moment sort of 3 different sizes, which are they're really meant to be portable first aid kits, right? So the middle size is quite popular now. It's roughly the same size as uh, a standard wet kit. If you buy a bag for traveling, like a shaving bag or where you put your toothpaste and stuff in, that sort of
Yes.
size bag, you can actually pack quite a lot of stuff in it if you pack wisely. And
Hmm.
if you pack neatly and you consider what it is that you're taking. So that size is quite good. And then we've got a slightly bigger size, which works quite well for a motor vehicle. It's probably about 250 millimeters square and about 120 millimeters thick if it's fully packed. And that thing can
Okay.
swallow a ton of equipment. And it's it's all about how you pack it and what you choose to go in there. And in a smaller vehicle, consider where you can keep it as well. And in some cases, the vehicles actually have spaces for first aid kits. And some of obviously, the more expensive vehicles now sometimes actually come with a little first aid kit as well. Although I would seriously reconsider what I pack in there from what I might get for free when I buy a vehicle. Um,
Okay.
so the content to adapt it, but sometimes there is a convenient space for it. Another
Mm.
vehicle kit that works quite well is you get the headrest first aid kit, which it's basically a pouch. You get different ones from different manufacturers. It's a pouch that it sits here basically behind the headrest on your vehicle.
Okay.
What is quite cool about that is if you're in an accident, we always tend to think of I'm helping other people. And what about helping yourself? And
Yes.
thing you can literally reach it, pull it out, and you can open it here on your lap or something so you can start working on it. A nice one is the one from Helicon Tex, which Cerberus Outdoor imports. Or Cerberus Tactical, if you speak to Alex at Cerberus, he can sort that out. What I've done with that, for instance, is I've packed 2. So the one that sits directly behind me is a more like a trauma bag. It's similar to an IFAC, just expanded. Then the one on the headrest on the opposite side, on the passenger side, that's my more general first aid kit. So that's got all your
Yes.
secondary care and wound care and nice to haves, and all the ouch pouch stuff is in there. You can still reach it, of course, from the front seat. You just stick your arm across to the passenger side, but it gives you 2 kits. And, if the people who travel with you are aware of it, they also know which one to reach. What is nice about that is in a
Yes.
smaller car, if you have that there, it doesn't really influence the people, say, sitting in the back seat so much. It doesn't take up that much space. So it's quite a cool thing. You
Yes.
can stick it there. Honestly, you actually almost forget about the fact that it's there after a while. You get used to it. I don't know. People are always concerned that those things will get stolen, if you park your vehicle somewhere. I've fortunately never had that issue. But also what I found is if you buy the black one, it actually gels fairly well with the vehicle and you don't see it. So a guy walking past looking for something to scavenge out of a vehicle doesn't necessarily notice that sitting behind the headrest. Whereas if you get the bright red one, of course, it stands out.
Well, that helps.
No.
Yes. Yeah. Because I was now sitting here thinking of those bright green ones that you buy at Dis-Chem.
Yes.
And I was thinking, that it is going to stand out. But then again, if somebody wants to break into your vehicle or steal your vehicle, they're going to do it in any case, whether there's a med kit or not.
Yeah, no,
I think you.
I'm more meant like stealing loose items out of your vehicle,
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
so
yeah,
you not stealing the entire vehicle. But yeah, so look, I mean, you could make something like that. Like you said, you can buy a pharmacy first aid kit and hang that behind your headrest if you want, but some of them they're actually made for that job. So they come with the correct straps and so forth.
yes, yes.
And those are high quality products, like the Helicon ones. I also have one from North American
Okay.
Rescue, which is quite nice, but it's a much bulkier kit, which is more suited maybe to a pickup truck or something like that, or a bigger truck where there isn't somebody sitting behind you, so it doesn't irritate them so much with thing hanging there. Whereas the smaller Helicon ones are very nice, where even for a
Yes.
compact car you could have that in there.
Okay. So once I've got this med kit, um, on what sort of frequency would you suggest I check the items to make sure that A, I've still got everything I need, and B, everything that needs expiry dates checked are sorted and kept up to date?
Yeah, so that's a good question, around, because in a vehicle, especially if a kit lives in the vehicle all the time, I would replace things way more often than possibly is indicated on the expiry date. Remember, if it sits in the heat all day and it goes hot and cold, it also deteriorates. So even I know things like bandages and so forth, they often have expiry dates on them, which to some extent it seems silly, but often the expiry date actually it considers things like the sterility of the packaging and so on. How long is it going to stay sterile? Now keep in mind that in emergency medicine, sterility is, you try, but it's never going to be sterile, right? Because the situation doesn't really allow for that. But when the materials actually do deteriorate, so the last thing you want is, you pull out your fancy, military-looking trauma bandage when the thing turns to powder the moment you open it. And that can happen. I would also say, of course, any medications or things like, cleaning products like wound care stuff, Dettol and Savlon and that sort of thing, I would replace that a little bit more frequently if it lives in a medical kit. And then anything that uses a glue. So chest seals, there would be, specifically chest seals can be quite an issue. Not only can the glue malfunction, but sometimes the glue becomes almost like this, it's just a sticky mess, basically, and you can't get the chest seal open. And, once again, you think, I've spent, $1,000 on a couple of sets of chest seals here, and now the stuff doesn't work. If you first aid kits often also have plaster tape and duct tape and things like that in that. Same story, replace that more frequently. Check it often, make sure it's there. Also keep in mind that if stuff gets used out of that kit, you need to replace it, as with any first aid kit, but because it's kind of not in the face all the time, a vehicle kit like that, one tends to forget, and then you're looking for something, you go, oh hell, I used that a year ago and I didn't put it back in, and now I'm in trouble.
Probably a safe way of doing things, that make a habit of, the moment you use something, replace it, don't wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
So depending on destinations and climates and that sort of thing, are there any specific medications that you would maybe consider putting in your med kit to cater for that?
Yes, I mean, you're going to have to consider the area. So if it's, look, your basic foundational stuff tends to stay the same. Maybe if you're going to go, I don't know, on holiday in a really dangerous place, which you might want to reconsider, but then, you want to increase some items. But when it comes to environmental conditions, that is actually quite an important question. Am I going to be, say, partaking in ocean activities? Am I going to be partaking in freshwater activities? Will I be out in the sun? Maybe I should increase things like, burn shield after sun products, sunburn care, that sort of thing. Then obviously on the medication side, the environmental considerations becomes quite important, because, if you're going into a more, say, a subtropical or a tropical area, you may require other medications, and also preventative medications, right? So you might want, say, malaria prophylaxis, or you want, whatever, things to deal with bilharzia or whatever it might be. So it depends where you're traveling. So it's normally a good idea, especially if you're going to do something like, say, travel up through Africa, you're going to go overlanding or whatever, is to speak to a knowledgeable person, not somebody on Facebook. I mean, speak to a doctor who really knows that stuff, or speak to a pharmacist who understands that. Or maybe to somebody who's a specialist in wellness medicine or whatever, who can help you with that. Keep in mind that your actual GP might not be familiar with what happens in other climate zones, and he might not have dealt with that since university days. So a travel clinic is generally a good place to start, and then read up on what you need as well. Don't just look at what's kind of being sold to you. Look at look at the next layer. Go and do some research on it.
Yes. I mean, personally, for me, basics, headaches, hay fever, runny tummy, that sort of stuff. And then whatever is applicable. If you're going to, say, the Kruger National Park in summertime specifically, make sure you've got... I lost a friend 2 years ago. He went hiking in the Kruger National Park for a week, got bitten by a mozzie, and less than a week later he was gone, just like that. And this was a guy who ran. He did the 2 oceans and the Comrades basically as a warm up for the Sky Run there in the mountains, Eastern Cape. He was that fit, and just like that, So these are things that you really need to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Things like malaria, it doesn't distinguish, right? Whether you're fit and strong or old and weak, it doesn't care.
Exactly.
Anybody can get it, and it's all about getting a rapid diagnosis and a rapid care for it. So, for instance, I carry, if I travel to malaria areas, and then after I come back from malaria areas for a while, I carry with me specifically a malaria travel kit, which has got a diagnostic in it. So like a home diagnostic, I can test myself. I can see if I start feeling bad. And it's got for medications. I don't want to, in this type of forum, run into what medications and so on. I think people need to get consultation on that sort of thing. But you can buy a kit like that. You can or get it prescribed if need be, and you can carry the stuff with you if you have some understanding of how to use it. Because especially in more remote areas, like if I think of some of the places where I work through Africa, getting hold of medication is quite difficult. So if you don't have it with you when you need it, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Bob, for this first aid kit that I keep in my vehicle, what would you say would you consider to be some of the more important first aid skills that one, I'm going to say, ought to have, because it's important?
So look, on vehicles,
but in order to be effective.
As with
any
emergency situation, like we mentioned last time, the first skill you always want to learn is your bleeding control skills, to deal with severe bleeding. Considering with your motor vehicle accidents, your chance of having to deal with severe bleeding is quite high. People always think also it's vehicle against vehicle, but it may be vehicle versus pedestrian, or vehicle versus motorcycle, or something like that, which changes that sort of trauma situation quite severely. I mean, even a low-speed pedestrian accident can cause major damage to the pedestrian, and dealing with it can be quite difficult. So your bleeding control skills, and then as always with vehicles, you want to have some knowledge surrounding things like spinal management, how to either move a patient or not move a patient. It would be useful, especially in more remote areas, to have skills surrounding things like splinting, understanding maybe how to traction a femur, that's the upper, the thigh bone. Maybe some equipment or knowledge of equipment surrounding that. It's also sometimes ask yourself what caused the accident. People always think, oh, it's speed or recklessness or something, but sometimes there's an underlying issue, So the guy who's suddenly drives diagonally across the road may have had a heart attack, or he may have, he may be suffering a low blood sugar emergency or something to that extent. So knowledge of more than just bleeding control is quite important always. As I said, for our typical audience here, I think with these podcast or the Fortis podcast, you've got, guys always think about gunshots and things like that, and they're always considering just bleeding control and just stop the bleed. But, there's a lot in a normal first aid course that's life-saving. So your CPR skills may be useful. Relieving choking may be useful. Guys chewing on something when he has a motor accident, guy may be choking at that stage.
Yes.
It's also it's one of the more common things I think that first aiders get involved with as motor vehicle accidents, because it's high up there in terms of likelihood. Probably the most dangerous thing most people do in a day is to go out on the road or walk across the road. So specific knowledge surrounding motor vehicle accidents. If you do a course where there's some simulation of motor vehicle accidents, it helps to get your brain around it rather than just having a classroom discussion about it. And then of course it's not per se a first aid skill, but your pre-first aid skills, your hazard skills. How safe is it to approach this vehicle? Do I know what I'm seeing? Can I see is there fluid running out? Is it something to be scared of? Is it fuel? Is it coolant that's running out? Is it going to burn me? Is it corrosive? Your battery acid, for instance, and so on. Having some knowledge of the vehicle, how to stabilize the vehicle, how do I put vehicle chocks in under a tire? How do I look that the vehicle is safe before I enter it? Knowledge of things like airbags. Airbags are actually blooming dangerous to first responders. You stick your head in the vehicle, and when there's a delayed deployment of an airbag, you can get dead or paralyzed from that. So there's a lot of things to consider when you when you get involved, and practicing those skills and actually sitting through a decent course where those things are discussed is a good idea. Because sometimes it's a big eye opener. It's like, oh shit, I never thought of that. It's if I'm just going to put my hands in here and hold the guy's head, and when the airbag hits me behind the head, suddenly my life changes.
Drastically. Well, Walter, thank you. I think that covers the subject well enough for what we had in mind. So I'm going to stick with that. We're running out of time. Thank you so much once again for your time, and to our listeners and followers out there, remember to like and subscribe so that we can grow the channel with your assistance, so that we can get the messages out to more people. Walter, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Riaan. Thanks for having me.